April 28, 1945, 11 o'clock at night, Dachau concentration camp, Bavaria, Germany. In a barracks isolated from the rest of the camp, 15 men lay dying. They wore striped uniforms with pink triangles sewn onto their chests. The pink triangle, the Nazi marking for homosexuals, the most despised prisoners in the entire camp system. Guards beat them for sport. Other prisoners avoided them like plague. Their survival rate? 60% mortality. The highest death rate of any prisoner group in the Holocaust. Of the 200 men who had passed through this barracks over 3 years, only 15 remained alive. 15 skeletons, 15 ghosts, 15 souls who had lost all hope. Wilhelm Becker was one of them. Prisoner number 17843, 26 years old but looking 60. He weighed 92 pounds. Before his arrest, he had weighed 158 pounds and stood 5 feet 10 inches tall. His teeth were falling out. His hair had thinned to wisps. Open sores covered his body that would never heal. He lay on his wooden plank that night, waiting for sleep or death. They felt the same now. Then everything changed. 20 feet away in the guard office attached to their barracks, SS guard Karl Richter turned on a small radio. It was forbidden, technically, but who would punish him now? The Allied forces were closing in. The Reich was collapsing. Half the guards had already deserted, fleeing before the Americans arrived. Richter wanted information. How close were they really? He turned the dial slowly. Static. Then a German voice from Radio Reich, spewing propaganda lies about German victory. He kept turning, more static, then a voice, clear, strong, speaking English with an unmistakable American accent. This is the American Armed Forces Network. Tonight, April 28, 1945. Allied forces are advancing rapidly through Bavaria. American troops are now within 12 miles of Dachau concentration camp. Liberation is imminent. The volume was low. Richter didn't want anyone else hearing this. But the walls of the prisoner barracks were paper-thin. Built cheaply to house men, the Nazis considered less than human. And in the silence of that night, the sound carried. In the darkness, Wilhelm's eyes snapped open. Had he heard that? Or was he hallucinating again? Starvation did that, made you hear things that weren't there. But then the voice continued. To any prisoners who might hear this message, hold on, help is coming. You will be free soon. Wilhelm felt something warm on his face. He touched his cheek. Tears. He hadn't cried in over a year. He thought he'd lost the ability. The camp had beaten it out of him, starved it out of him, tortured it out of him. But now tears flowed freely. To his left he heard a sound, a choked sob. It was Klaus, 28 years old, in the camp for 2 years. Klaus was crying too. Then Martin, then Friedrich, then Josef. One by one, all 15 men began to weep. Not loud sobs. They didn't have the strength for that. Just tears. Silent tears rolling down emaciated faces. Some clasped their hands together in prayer. Others closed their eyes and smiled for the first time in years. Did you hear that? Wilhelm whispered to Klaus in the bunk next to him. Klaus nodded, unable to speak. Americans, they're coming for us. Maybe, Klaus whispered back. Maybe we'll live. It was the first time in 3 years that the word maybe had meant anything positive. Maybe they would see tomorrow. Maybe they would walk out of this hell alive. Maybe this nightmare had an end. But what they didn't know was that this moment, this simple American voice on a forbidden radio, was the culmination of 3 years of unimaginable suffering. 3 years that began with love and ended in the darkest chapter of human history. This is the story of Wilhelm Becker, music teacher, prisoner, survivor, and the forgotten victims of a Holocaust within the Holocaust. This is the story of the pink triangles, and this is the story that history tried to erase. Let's go back 3 years. Berlin, January 1942. Wilhelm Becker was 23 years old, blonde hair, blue eyes, gentle smile. He taught music at a private school in Berlin, piano, violin, music theory. He loved teaching, loved seeing children discover the beauty of music for the first time, their joy, their wonder. It gave his life meaning. Wilhelm lived in a small apartment in Schöneberg, a neighborhood in Berlin, with his partner Thomas Müller. Thomas was 28, an architect. They'd been together for 4 years, in absolute secret, because this was 1942, this was Nazi Germany, and being homosexual was a crime. Paragraph 175 of the German Criminal Code, punishment, prison, labor camp, or worse. Since Hitler came to power in 1933, things had become a nightmare. Gay bars shut down. Books about homosexuality burned, thousands of men arrested, tortured, sent to camps. Wilhelm and Thomas had been careful, extremely careful. No public displays of affection, never frequenting gay bars, too dangerous. They presented themselves as roommates, nothing more. They had survived this long. Wilhelm still remembered when Berlin was different, before Hitler, before the hate. In the 1920s, Berlin had been the gay capital of Europe. Bars, clubs, cabarets, a vibrant community. The Institute for Sexual Wissenschaft, the Institute for Sexual Science, run by Dr. Magnus Hirschfeld. A place where homosexuality was studied with respect, where science sought to understand, not condemn. Wilhelm had been 11 years old then, but he remembered the stories his uncle Friedrich told him. Friedrich was homosexual too, openly, back then. He frequented the cabarets, lived his life freely. Wilhelm, one day you'll be able to live like me, freely, with pride. But that day never came. 1933. Hitler took power. The SA, Sturmabteilung, the brown shirts, attacked Hirschfeld's institute. They burned the books, destroyed the research. 20,000 books and documents. Gone. Photos of that book burning went around the world, but few people understood what it really meant. It meant, we will erase your existence, your history, your humanity. Friedrich was arrested in 1934, sent to Dachau, died in 1935. Official cause, pneumonia. Real cause, probably beaten to death or worked to exhaustion. Wilhelm never got to mourn him publicly. How do you grieve someone you can't talk about? Whose death is considered deserved? So Wilhelm learned to live in shadows, to hide who he was, to wear a mask. In public, Wilhelm the teacher, polite, neutral, invisible. In private, Wilhelm the lover. With Thomas, their small apartment, their small world. It was enough. It had to be. January 1942. The war was raging. Germany had invaded half of Europe, but in Berlin life continued more or less. Wilhelm taught, Thomas worked, they listened to the radio carefully, news from the front. They hoped the war would end soon, that everything would return to normal, but normal would never come. February 1942, Valentine's Day. Thomas prepared a special dinner. Nothing extravagant, rations were limited, but he'd managed to get some meat, fresh vegetables, and a bottle of wine he'd hidden for months for this occasion. Wilhelm came home from work, tired but happy. "Happy Valentine's Day, mein Schatz," Thomas said. "You did all this? For me?" "Always. For you." They ate. They laughed. They held hands. For a few hours, they forgot the outside world. After dinner, Wilhelm played piano, a Beethoven sonata. Thomas listened with his eyes closed, smiling. "I love you," Thomas said simply, sincerely. "I love you too, more than anything. Promise me something." "What?" "Whatever happens, remember this moment. Remember us. This love." Wilhelm laughed. "Why are you talking like that? Nothing's going to happen." But Thomas had a bad feeling, something he couldn't explain. "Promise anyway." "Okay, I promise." They kissed, held each other. not knowing this was the last night they would spend together. The next morning changed everything. February 15th, 1942, morning, bang! Someone pounded violently on the door. Wilhelm woke up startled, confused, terrified. Polizei, öffnen Sie die Tür. Police, open the door. Thomas and Wilhelm locked eyes. Pure terror. Shit, Thomas whispered. They know. How? I don't know, but they know. Bang, bang, bang. Open now or we break down the door. Thomas went to the door, unlocked it. 3 men in Gestapo uniforms burst in brutally. Thomas Müller? Wilhelm Becker? Yes, Thomas said, you are under arrest. Paragraph 175, homosexual relations. They didn't even have time to dress properly. The Gestapo men searched the apartment looking for evidence. They found letters, photos. Nothing explicit, but enough. Photos of them together, smiling, arms around each other. For the Gestapo, that was proof enough. Schwein, one agent spat. Pigs, they were handcuffed, led outside. Neighbors watched, some with pity, most with disgust. Mrs. Schneider, the upstairs neighbor, literally spat as Wilhelm passed. Disgusting! Perverts in our building! Wilhelm lowered his head, humiliated. They were thrown into a truck with 5 other men, all arrested for the same crime. The truck took them to Gestapo headquarters, Prinz Albrechtstrasse, a name that made every Berliner shudder. This was where interrogations happened. Torture. Forced confessions. Wilhelm and Thomas were separated immediately. Thomas, Wilhelm, I love you. Remember your promise. Then they were taken in different directions. Wilhelm would never see Thomas again. Wilhelm was taken to a basement cell. Small, cold, damp, no window, a metal bed, a bucket, nothing else. He waited. Hours, days. He didn't know. No food, no water, just waiting. And terror. Finally, 2 men came to get him. They took him to an interrogation room. A man in SS uniform sat behind a desk. Obersturmführer, SS Captain, Franz Dietrich. Cold eyes, cruel expression. Sit down, Herr Becker. Wilhelm sat, trembling. You know why you're here? I was told, paragraph 175. Correct? Homosexual relations. A crime against nature. A crime against the Reich. Wilhelm said nothing. Do you admit your crime? We didn't do anything wrong. Smack. Dietrich slapped him hard. Wilhelm fell from his chair. Liar! We have evidence! Photos! Letters! Wilhelm cried. Please, we're not hurting anyone. You hurt the purity of the German race. You are a disease. Dietrich continued the interrogation, asking humiliating questions about their sex life, their relationship, other names. Wilhelm refused to give other names. He didn't know many anyway. For that, he was beaten. Again and again. Finally, Dietrich said, You will be transferred to a re-education camp. Perhaps hard labor will cure your perversion. Re-education camp. A Nazi euphemism for concentration camp. Wilhelm was returned to his cell. He stayed there 3 days. No trial, no lawyer, no rights, just a prisoner awaiting his fate. On the 3rd day, he was taken with a group of 30 other men. All homosexuals, all condemned. They were loaded into trains, cattle cars, destination Sachsenhausen concentration camp, then Dachau. The journey took 2 days, packed together. No food, little water. 1 bucket for everyone for waste. The smell was unbearable. Some men cried, others prayed. Some stayed silent. Wilhelm thought of Thomas. Where was he? In another car, another camp. Was he still alive? He held on to the promise, remembered that last night, the dinner, the music, the words. I love you. It had to be enough. It had to keep him alive. The train finally arrived. The doors opened violently. Raus, raus, schnell. Out, out, fast. SS guards screamed, hitting with batons. Men stumbled out. Many fell, were trampled, beaten if they didn't get up fast enough. Wilhelm looked around. Barbed wire, watchtowers, guards with dogs, a gate with words in wrought iron, Arbeit macht frei. Work sets you free. A cruel lie. They were lined up, counted, registered, given prisoner uniforms, grey and blue stripes, and on the left chest a pink triangle, the marking of homosexuals. In the camp hierarchy, pink triangles were at the very bottom. Below political prisoners, red triangle. Below criminals, green triangle. Even below asocials, black triangle. They were considered the worst, the most disgusting, the least human. Other prisoners despised them. Guards tortured them for pleasure. The mortality rate of pink triangles, 60%, higher than almost any other group. Wilhelm learned the camp rules quickly. 1. Never look a guard in the eyes. 2. Obey immediately, no questions. 3. Never complain, never cry publicly. 4. Work until exhaustion, then continue. 5. Survive. Somehow. Pink triangles were assigned the worst jobs. Stone quarry, carrying heavy rocks 12 hours a day. Little food, contaminated water, no medical care. Guards beat them for pleasure. Invented games. Hassenjagd, rabbit hunt. Force a prisoner to run toward the electric fence, then shoot him for attempting escape. Medical experiments. Forced castration, hormonal injections, attempts to cure homosexuality, sexual abuse, by guards, by kapos, prisoners put in positions of authority. Wilhelm saw men die every single day, from hunger, disease, despair, suicide. He saw men throw themselves onto the electrified barbed wire, preferring quick death to slow suffering. He saw humanity disappear from others' eyes, and from his own. 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. The days blended together, indistinguishable. Wilhelm was no longer really Wilhelm. He was prisoner 17843, pink triangle. He'd lost 44 pounds. His hair was falling out. His teeth were loose. He had sores that wouldn't heal. Diseases eating him slowly. But he survived. Why? He didn't really know. Maybe the promise to Thomas. Maybe primitive survival instinct. Maybe just the habit of breathing. But he survived. And that's all that mattered. Until that night in April 1945, when an American voice on a radio changed everything. April 28th, 1945, 10:10 p.m., Dachau concentration camp. Wilhelm was now prisoner 17843, 3 years in hell. He was 26 years old but looked 60. Skeletal body, grey skin, sunken eyes, multiple diseases. He weighed 92 pounds. He was in the special barracks for pink triangles. 15 men remained out of over 200 who had passed through. They were all dying to varying degrees. The barracks was isolated from the rest of the camp to avoid moral contamination of other prisoners. A cruel insult. Even in hell they were marginalized. This night was different, though. The SS guards were nervous. Wilhelm could see it. They talked in low voices, looked toward the horizon, listened for distant sounds. Some guards had already deserted, fleeing before the Allies arrived. Those who remained were trapped, terrified of what would happen to them. Guard Karl Richter, 30 years old, was on duty that night. He wasn't the worst guard, not the best either. He'd beaten prisoners, participated in horrors, but without the sadism of some others. Tonight, he was alone in the guard office, right next to the pink triangle barracks. He wanted to know, were the Allies really close? He pulled out a small radio, forbidden, technically. But who would punish him now? He turned the dial, looking for a station. Static. Then a voice, in German, Radio Reich, propaganda. We're winning. The Allies are retreating. Lies. He kept turning the dial. Another station, weak but audible. A voice in English. American radio. Probably US Army. The volume was low. Richter didn't want others to hear, but the barracks walls were thin, and in the silence of night, sound carried. Inside the barracks, the 15 men lay on their wooden bunks, too weak to move, too exhausted to talk, just waiting for sleep or death. Both seemed the same now, and then a voice, faint, distant but clear, a male voice, American accent, speaking English. Wilhelm opened his eyes, listened. He'd learned some English in school long ago. Another lifetime. He didn't understand everything, but he understood enough. The voice said, "This is the American Armed Forces Network. Tonight, April 28th, 1945. Allied forces advancing rapidly through Bavaria. American troops now within 12 miles of Dachau concentration camp. Liberation is imminent." Wilhelm froze. Had he heard that right, or was he hallucinating? The voice continued. "To any prisoners who might hear this, hold on, help is coming. You will be free soon." Wilhelm felt something warm on his face. Tears. He hadn't cried in months, maybe a year. He thought he'd lost that ability. But now tears flowed freely. He heard a sound to his left, a choked sob. It was Klaus, 28 years old, 2 years in the camp. Klaus was crying too, then Martin, 31 years old, 3 years in the camp. Then Friedrich, 24 years old, the youngest survivor. One by one, all 15 men began to cry, silently at first. They didn't have strength for loud sobs, just tears, rolling down emaciated, bearded, dirty faces. Some clasped their hands together, in prayer or just hope. Others closed their eyes, smiled for the first time in years. Wilhelm turned to Klaus in the bunk beside him. "Did you hear that?" Wilhelm whispered. Klaus nodded, unable to speak. "Americans, they're coming." "Maybe," Klaus whispered. "Maybe we'll survive." It was the first time in 3 years that the word maybe had a positive meaning. Maybe they would see tomorrow. Maybe they would leave here alive. Maybe this hellish life had an end. The voice on the radio continued, talking about troop advances, Germany's defeat. Then it played music, an American song, joyful, full of life. Wilhelm didn't know the song, but the melody. It reminded him there was a world outside these barbed wires, a world with music, beauty, life. He'd completely forgotten. For 3 years, his world had been pain, hunger, death, survival, nothing else. But now this voice, this music, it reminded him he was Wilhelm Becker, music teacher, lover of Thomas, human being, not just prisoner 17843, not just a number, not just a pink triangle. He was someone, and maybe he could become someone again. Martin, across the barracks, began singing softly, his voice broken by dehydration and disease. He sang an old German song, a lullaby. Wilhelm recognized it. His mother used to sing it. Others joined in. Weak voices, but sincere. 15 dying men, singing a lullaby in a concentration camp. It was absurd, tragic, but also magnificent, because it was an act of resistance. Not with weapons, not with violence, but with humanity. Singing was saying, "We are still human. You haven't completely broken us." The tears continued, but now there were also smiles, fragile smiles, but real. Klaus reached out his hand. Wilhelm took it. They held hands. 2 men holding on together. "If we survive," Klaus said, "what will you do?" "I want to see the ocean. I've never seen the ocean." Wilhelm smiled. "I want to play piano, a real song, not just in my head." "You're a musician. I was a music teacher before all this. You'll teach again when we get out." "You think so?" "We have to believe it, otherwise why hold on?" Wilhelm nodded. "You're right." They stayed like that, holding hands, listening to the distant radio, crying and smiling. For the first time in 3 years, Wilhelm felt something other than despair. He felt hope, fragile, uncertain, but there. The radio finally turned off. Richter shut it down, but it didn't matter. The message was received. Help was coming. They just had to hold on. One more day, maybe two. Then freedom. That night, Wilhelm slept better than he'd slept in 3 years. Not comfortably. Still on a wooden plank. Still hungry. Still sick. But in his mind, he dreamed of Thomas, their apartment, music, freedom. And when he woke the next morning, he decided, I will survive no matter what, just one more day, because freedom is coming. April 29th, 1945. Morning. The SS guards were gone. Most had fled during the night. A few remained, but they were disorganized, panicked. The camp was in chaos. Prisoners could feel something enormous was happening. Distant sounds, explosions, vehicles. Around noon, the first American tank appeared at the camp gates. Prisoners who still had strength screamed, cried, waved their hands. American soldiers opened the gates. You're free! You're free! But the liberation of Dachau was also a moment of trauma. The American soldiers weren't prepared for what they found. Thousands of bodies piled up, some in mass graves, others in trains, living prisoners who looked like skeletons, barely able to move, the smell of death, disease, despair. Some soldiers vomited, others cried. Private James Morrison, 22 years old from Texas, entered the Pink Triangle barracks. He saw 15 men, almost dead. Jesus Christ, he whispered. He called for medics. Medic! Medic! Here! Quickly! Wilhelm was conscious, but barely. He saw the American uniform, heard English. Is it real? He murmured in broken English. Morrison knelt down, took Wilhelm's hand. Yes, it's real. You're safe now. You're free. Wilhelm cried again. I thought I would die here. Not anymore. You're going to live. Military doctors arrived, began assessing the prisoners. 15 men in this barracks, all in critical condition, severe malnutrition, multiple diseases, untreated wounds. They were transported to the field hospital set up by the Americans. Wilhelm was placed in a bed, a real bed, with white sheets. He hadn't slept in a bed with sheets since February 1942. He touched the sheets gently, disbelieving. A nurse, Lieutenant Sarah Cohen, came to examine Wilhelm. What's your name? She asked in German. Wilhelm Becker. Not a number, your name? She smiled. Nice to meet you, Wilhelm. You're safe now. She gave him clean water. Fresh. Wilhelm drank slowly. It was the best thing he'd ever tasted. Food, too. But slowly. Your stomach can't handle much. She gave him light soup. Wilhelm cried while eating. Why are you crying? Because it's good. Because it's real. Because I'm alive. Sarah wiped his tears. Yes, you're alive. And you're going to stay that way. But not everyone survived. Of the 15 men in the Pink Triangle barracks, 5 died within the first 48 hours after liberation. Their bodies couldn't handle the shock of freedom. Refeeding syndrome. Their systems collapsed. Klaus, who wanted to see the ocean, died on May 1st. Wilhelm was beside him when he passed. Wilhelm, we're free. Did you see? Yes, Klaus, we're free. Good. That's good. Tell them I died free. Not a prisoner. I will, I promise. Klaus smiled, closed his eyes, never woke up. Wilhelm cried, but also felt grateful. Klaus died free, not in the camp, not as a prisoner, but as a free man. That was something. Of the 15 men, 10 survived. Wilhelm was one of them. Wilhelm stayed in the field hospital for 3 weeks, slowly gaining strength, gaining weight, healing physically, at least. Mentally. That was another story. Mid-May, Wilhelm was strong enough to be moved to a rehabilitation center for camp survivors to help them reintegrate. There he met other survivors, other Pink Triangles. They talked, shared stories, cried together. Wilhelm asked everyone, "Do you know Thomas Miller? From Berlin, architect arrested February 1942. No one knew him. Wilhelm searched lists, registers, survivors. Thomas Müller wasn't on any survivor list. Finally, Wilhelm found the truth. Thomas had been sent to Sachsenhausen, then Buchenwald. He died in January 1945, 4 months before liberation. Cause typhus. Wilhelm collapsed, cried for hours. Thomas was dead, the man he loved, gone. He would never get the chance to see him again, to tell him, "I love you," one more time, to fully keep his promise. But he had survived, and Thomas would have wanted him to live, so Wilhelm decided, "I'll live for both of us." June 1945. Wilhelm was released from the rehabilitation center. Where to go? Berlin was in ruins, his apartment probably destroyed. He had no close family. His parents died during the war. He was alone. He decided to stay in Germany, near Munich, start a new life. He changed his name. Wilhelm Bauer. Why? Because being known as a pink triangle survivor was dangerous, even after the war, even after liberation. Paragraph 175 was still in effect in German law. Homosexuals were still criminals. Many pink triangle survivors were rearrested after the war, sent back to prison to complete their sentences. It was a horrible injustice, but it was reality. So Wilhelm hid his past, became invisible again. He found work as a music teacher in a small town, teaching piano to children, like before, but he never talked about his past, never about the camp, never about Thomas. He lived, but not really. He existed, but didn't truly live. Because how can you live fully when you have to hide who you are? The years passed, 1950, 1960, 1970. Wilhelm lived alone, silent about his past. He taught, played music, existed, but a part of him died in that camp, 1969. The Stonewall riots in New York, the beginning of the modern LGBTQ rights movement. Wilhelm heard about it. He was 50 years old now. He wondered, is the world finally changing? 1973. The American Psychiatric Association removed homosexuality from its list of mental disorders. 1985. West Germany finally modified paragraph 175. But real change was slow. Too slow. 1995. 50 years after Dachau's liberation. There was a commemorative ceremony for all survivors. Wilhelm, now 76 years old, decided to attend. It was the first time he'd returned to Dachau since 1945. At the ceremony, he saw other survivors, old now, but alive. He saw memorials for Jews, political prisoners, POWs, but no memorial for pink triangles, no mention of homosexual victims, as if they didn't exist. Wilhelm felt anger rising, an anger he'd suppressed for 50 years. After the ceremony, he approached the organizers. "Why is there nothing for the pink triangles? We suffered too. We died here too." The organizer, uncomfortable, replied, "It's complicated. Homosexuality was illegal. It's still sensitive." Sensitive? We were tortured, murdered, and you can't even acknowledge us. Wilhelm left, furious, broken, but something changed in him. He decided, I won't hide anymore. 1987. Wilhelm wrote his memoir. He told everything. His arrest, the camp, Thomas, the suffering, and that night when an American voice on a radio gave him hope. He sent the manuscript to several publishers. Most refused. Too controversial. Not enough market. But one small publisher accepted. The book was published in 1998. The Pink Triangle, Memoir of a Forgotten Survivor. It didn't become a bestseller, but it found its audience. Other Pink Triangle survivors read it, contacted Wilhelm. Thank you for speaking. We suffered in silence too. Historians began to pay attention, to research. How many men were persecuted under paragraph 175? Approximately 100,000 arrested, about 50,000 convicted, between 5,000 and 15,000 sent to concentration camps. Mortality rate in camps, 60%, the highest of all groups. And after the war, many re-arrested. No compensation, no recognition. Paragraph 175 remained in effect in Germany until 1994. Yes, 1994. 49 years after the war ended, homosexual victims of Nazism weren't officially recognized until 2002. 57 years after liberation, 2002. An official ceremony, the German government apologized. Wilhelm, 83 years old, was invited to speak. He walked onto the stage, frail but determined. "My name is Wilhelm Becker. I was a pink triangle prisoner. I spent 3 years at Dachau. I watched hundreds of men die. I was tortured, starved, dehumanized, all because I loved a man. For 57 years, our suffering was ignored, forgotten, minimized. We were told we deserved our fate, that we were criminals. Even after liberation, we weren't free. Many of us died without ever being recognized. My partner Thomas Müller died 4 months before liberation. There's no monument for him, no plaque, nothing, as if he never existed. But he existed, we all existed. We were sons, brothers, friends, lovers. We were human. And we deserve to be remembered, not as criminals, not as shameful victims, but as survivors, as resistors, as human beings who refused to die in silence. I tell this story not for pity, but for memory, so that young LGBTQ people today know you are not alone. You were never alone. Others before you suffered, struggled, survived, and they did it so you could live freely. Don't forget us. Please don't forget us." The crowd applauded. Standing ovation. Many cried. Wilhelm cried too, but these were tears of relief. Finally, they were recognized. A memorial was erected in Berlin for homosexual victims of Nazism. A simple but powerful structure. Wilhelm, now 89 years old, attended the inauguration. He placed his hand on the memorial. "Thomas," he whispered, "they remember you now. I never forgot you, never." 2010. Wilhelm was 91 years old, in his bed, peacefully. His last words, "Thomas, I'm coming. Wait for me." At his funeral, hundreds came, survivors, activists, historians, young LGBTQ people. All came to honor a man who refused to die in silence, a man who transformed his pain into memory, his trauma into testimony. On his grave, an inscription, "Wilhelm Becker, 1919-2010, Pink Triangle Survivor Witness Voice for the Forgotten Don't Forget Us." And beside it, a second stone. Placed by ceremony organizers, Thomas Müller, 1914-1945, loved by Wilhelm, never forgotten. Because finally, after 65 years, Thomas was recognized too. Their love was recognized. And their humanity could no longer be denied. How did a simple voice on a radio save 15 dying souls? It wasn't the voice itself. It was what it represented: hope, freedom, humanity. In the darkest moment, when everything seemed lost, a voice reminded them, the world still exists, hope still exists. You are not forgotten. Wilhelm and the other pink triangles survived hell. But their struggle didn't end with liberation. They had to fight for 50 more years for recognition, for the right to say, we suffered too, we count too. Their story teaches us something vital. History is written by those in power, and the marginalized are often erased. For decades, homosexual victims of Nazism were forgotten, their suffering minimized, their deaths uncommemorated. Why? Because even after Nazism's defeat, homophobia persisted. Paragraph 175 remained in effect until 1994. Survivors were rearrested, not compensated, not recognized. It was injustice added to injustice, but men like Wilhelm refused silence. They spoke, testified, fought for memory, and finally the world listened. The lessons. 1. Hope can survive even in the darkest conditions. A simple voice on a radio gave strength to hold on. 2. Marginalized victims deserve the same recognition as all others. Pink triangles were Holocaust victims too. Their memory is sacred. 3. Silence is a form of erasure. If we don't tell these stories, they die, and with them, the lessons. 4. Love is stronger than hate. Wilhelm and Thomas loved despite danger, and that love survived even death. 5. The struggle for rights never ends. Even after liberation, Wilhelm had to fight to be recognized. Freedom is never guaranteed. Today, we live in a world where many countries recognize LGBTQ rights, marriage, adoption, legal protection. But this wasn't a gift. It was the result of decades of struggle, of people like Wilhelm who refused to be silent. And there's still much to do. In more than 70 countries, homosexuality is still criminalized. In 11 countries, it's punished by death. LGBTQ people are still persecuted, murdered, erased. So this story isn't just about the past. It's a reminder. The struggle continues, and we must remember those who came before, who suffered so we could live freely. Wilhelm Becker, Thomas Müller, the 15 men in the barracks, the 15,000 pink triangles. Their names are largely lost, but their memory must survive, because if we forget, we risk repeating the same mistakes. Don't forget them, please, don't forget them. Paragraph 175, German law criminalizing homosexuality, in effect from 1871 to 1994. Nazi persecution, 100,000 men arrested between 1933 and 1945, 50,000 convicted, 5,000, 15,000 sent to camps. Pink triangle, marking for homosexual prisoners in camps. Pink triangle mortality rate, approximately 60%, the highest of almost all prisoner groups. After the war, many pink triangle survivors were rearrested after 1945 to complete sentences. They received no compensation. Recognition. Homosexual victims of Nazism weren't officially recognized by German government until 2002. A memorial was erected in Berlin in 2008. Dachau liberation. The camp was liberated by American forces on April 29, 1945. American radio. It's documented that some prisoners heard Allied radio broadcasts in the final days before liberation, giving them hope. The Men with the Pink Triangle by Heinz Heger, survivor memoir. Hidden Holocaust by Günter Grau, historical research. Paragraph 175, documentary by Rob Epstein and Jeffrey Friedman, United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, collection on homosexual victims. The Holocaust of homosexuals is often called the Forgotten Holocaust because it was largely ignored in official history for decades. It is crucial to remember all victims of Nazism, including those who were marginalized even in memory. Their stories matter, their lives mattered, their love mattered. Don't forget them.